Hello. Okay, Arcadian, a post-apocalyptic horror movie directed by a Benjamin Brewer. The film stars Nicolas Cage as the father of two teenage boys, all trying to survive in a post-apocalyptic world. So the story focuses on this father and his two sons and this very sort of tight family dynamic on this farm. The film is based 15 years after a pandemic has wiped out almost the entire population, and people are able to go out during the day to get what they need to be able to survive, but during the night they have to barricade themselves inside their homes because these creatures to just come up from underneath the ground. And so it's got a very intriguing, a very interesting premise. One I feel we have seen a few times before. But what I feel like they do a really good job at with this movie during its setup is really creating this kind of sense of dread. It has this kind of very foreboding, dread-filled atmosphere. It's very tense, and it sort of does a really good job at kind of pitting you, sort of the viewer, right into the heart of this little family, this father and his two sons. And it does feel isolating. You do feel like you're isolated from the rest of the world, and a lot of it is just down to the way the film is shot and how the camera is used and what sort of they focus on during certain moments. And so I think they do a really good job during the first act of this movie, the first 20 minutes of setting this world up and sort of introducing us to these characters and introducing us to where the world is at. Another aspect that I really liked about how they told this story was how nothing is really truly revealed to you. Everything is just hinted at, and that you're forced to use your imagination. They never really go into detail about what happened in the past in regards to these creatures and the pandemic and why we are just following this father and his two sons. Everything is just hinted at, and I really like that about this story. It kept me locked in. I was constantly intrigued. For example, there's this one particular moment with these two characters where they're playing this game and they give themselves 10 seconds to basically give their interpretations of what they felt happened in the past during the pandemic and sort of the arrival of these creatures. And so I thought that was a very clever way of sort of giving us two slightly kind of varying sort of accounts of what happened in the past, and then allowing us to sort of really put the pieces together. And so you've got some really nice moments like that within the movie that I thought was quite clever, was quite smart. But my biggest issue with this movie was, even though it was attempting at sort of injecting this big beating heart at the core of its story within this family unit with his father and his two sons, for me personally, I felt the film really struggled to achieve this, to achieve a journey when it comes to this family where I can get emotionally wrapped up within it. Unfortunately, I felt it was devoid of emotion. The film is trying to, it's very evident that that's what they're trying to do with the story, but it just doesn't quite come together for me, unfortunately. Like, the performances all around are pretty solid. I feel I am there with these characters in this world, but there was just something in the writing and how the story played out which just stopped me from really finding a heartbeat within this movie, within this story. The attempt is there, but there was this coldness to it all. So even though I couldn't really get emotionally wrapped up into this journey, I was still always intrigued, just down to a lot of these moments when it came to characters and even the horror that would sort of really keep me locked in. And when it comes to the horror, there are some really nice, creepy, tense moments dotted throughout the movie. They are very few and far between, but there are a couple of standouts, and this is one moment involving this arm coming through a door. That's all I'm going to say because this is spoiler free, but it was a very creepy, tense moment. A lot of that was down to the fact there were practical effects utilised within this moment. There is a lot of CGI as well, but there is a nice balance, I felt, of practical and CGI. And there are moments like that. Like I said, they are very few and far between, but they are very effective when you do get them. And it sent chills all over me. Like, it's a brilliant moment. And you've got this other moment during the third act, during this attack on this farm. That's all I'm going to say. And just the way that scene plays out, it kind of took me back to being a kid again, because I know that if I'd watched this movie as a kid, which I probably would have, it's one of those movies that I felt like I would have seeked out as a child, you know, like I did with Alien and Predator. And I know this movie would have scared the fucking life out of me, and I would have loved it as a result. And so it did kind of take me back to sort of to a certain era of film, really, in many ways, because it did kind of have a very sort of 90s monster B-movie feel about it as well. The Relic actually was a movie that sort of kept coming to my mind all the time while I was watching this. And so there is a lot that I liked about this movie. Like I said, I was always intrigued. I was always locked in. It has its moments, and I really like the setup and how they introduced us into this world. But it's just how these characters' stories sort of all intertwine and interact with each other that just didn't quite work for me. It just all ended up feeling quite mechanical and cold when it comes to the human aspect of the story. You can see what they are trying to do, but it's just those pieces of the story that just don't quite meld together. You get a lot of these sort of different pieces of the puzzle, and they just don't quite all lock in. I also really liked the score for this movie. I thought it was quite beautiful, and in many ways it's through the score that you can kind of sense what it was maybe they were aiming for when it comes to these characters' journeys, and sort of having that kind of big beating heart right in the middle of this family dynamic. Like, you can kind of sense that through the score, and I did feel, you know, it's as a result of the score really that perhaps gave the movie for me perhaps a little bit of a pulse, and because you kind of sense what it is they're trying to do. But unfortunately, it just doesn't come quite, you know, it doesn't come together. But I did really dig the score. It was quite beautiful. And in many ways, it reminded me a little bit of A Quiet Place. And I also really like how we only ever get glimpses of the creatures. We don't really see them sort of in their entirety. And I constantly found myself trying to work out, you know, what these things looked like and how they moved and what were they and all of that. And again, it was another one of those very kind of clever aspects when it comes to the filmmaking part of the movie, that kind of technical aspect that kind of just kept me locked in. It kept me intrigued. There's a lot I liked about this film, but ultimately it just ended up feeling like a scrapbook full of cool, creepy ideas with some nice character moments dotted throughout, with this intention of having a story with this big beating heart, you know, this kind of really deep human story, but it just didn't quite come together for me and meld into one. It's clearly inspired by other movies that for me personally did it a little better, but I really liked the effort here. I can't say I was ever bored. I was always intrigued and I was always wanting to know more. But when it comes to sort of the human aspect of the story, and when it comes to what I felt the intentions were for us to get really kind of emotionally wrapped up within these characters' journeys, it just didn't quite work for me, unfortunately. But there was a lot that I liked and a lot I appreciated about this film, and I did enjoy it. So yeah, enough rambling on from me. They are my thoughts on Arcadian, and I will be giving Arcadian a 6 out of 10. So yeah, they are my thoughts on Arcadian, but what did you guys think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews from just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. There's a couple of movies actually coming out this weekend. I'm hoping to catch... There's 3 of them actually, and that is The Bike Riders, Something in the Water and The Exorcism starring Russell Crowe. And so I'm not sure which order I'm going to watch them in. So yeah, I'm hoping to catch all 3 of those and they will be my next movie reviews. Probably starting with The Exorcism. And then yeah, so again, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll be catching you guys soon.